All right, Joe, we're almost done connecting. Just a few more seconds.
Good to see everyone again. We've been talking about what type of material and content to deliver. You know, this is a wide group of administrators from preschool age all the way to high school. You know, there might be schools that need more support, more scaffolding strategies, while other schools need differentiation and extension strategies. EDI adapts to that. You know, I want you to understand EDI, if I could simplify it to someone, is I'm trying to engage my students, incorporating reading strategies. I'm trying to keep my students engaged using brain research, but then the key is I'm constantly gathering information in real time. Formative assessment, that's the key. I'm making decisions in real time to alter my teaching decisions. And what I mean by that is as I teach content, and that's another one, we teach first. As I teach content to anyone, whether it's an adult, whether it's preschool, whether it's middle school, I will check for understanding in real time. And the way I do that is random selection and with whiteboards. And I make a decision when I see that, when I see the information from my students. Are too many students incorrect? Then I might reteach the whole class. Are all of my students correct? Well, I might be too easy. I need to extend them. How do I differentiate? So I'm constantly making decisions based on the information my students are getting me in real time in their formative assessment. So that's what we're trying to do, whether it's a GATE advanced class, whether I'm teaching college prep physics, or whether I'm teaching sounds to preschoolers, the T sound. So that being said, with this wide group of preschoolers to high school, today's the last session where I will have everyone together. So I've recommended to Ross that please let me have, we both decided it might be more effective if I could get the early childhood groups together so I could focus more on their curriculum, focus more on some reading strategies. What does EDI look like with their age groups? And then we could have the upper primary school students and high school students, so I could focus on what that curriculum looked like. So if you don't see your age a high school lesson today, I'm going to try to show a few examples, but you will see them in the next few sessions. There'll be content, there'll be year level specific to those breakout groups that we have next time. That being said, today we'll focus on the role of the instructional leader. Okay, what does it look like for implementation? What are our goals? So in your instructional leadership workshop PDF that you got, let's start on page 19. When you're looking for implementation, here are some things to really consider. What are our goals and what do you want to implement? First of all, as the leader of your school, you have to have a true vision of what resonates with you. What do you want to implement? What pedagogy are you passionate about? In many ways, hopefully it's research-based. Hopefully there's a lot of meta-analysis studies that show the success of whatever particular pedagogy you choose, because regardless of the pedagogy that you choose to implement, implementation is actually quite difficult. In fact, remember, we will be doing our engagement norm strategies to get that multiple pathways through the brain. Everyone read this with me, 1, 2, 3. Implementation requires practicing new strategies to automaticity. Instructional leaders close the implementation gap. The EDI curriculum includes classroom coaching. So what we found is for true implementation, learning something new can be quite difficult sometimes. I've talked to a lot of teachers, a lot of first-year teachers, teachers who've taught for quite a while. What we see is when you get your teaching credential in the university, there's a lot of theory. We learn a lot of theories on pedagogies. You know, my focus was constructivism. I was very passionate about it, and constructivism and inquiry-based learning. I still am. It's still very important to me. Sorry, my daughter's in the background. And What I did, I really believed in that, but when I got into the classroom, practical implementation was quite difficult because I didn't have concrete examples of how to teach. I was in a classroom and I'm like, how do I put all this theory into place? I now have 25 students that I have to engage, that I have to teach reading, that I needed practical tools. So that's what we really try to do at DataWORKS, is give teachers practical teaching strategies for them to implement. So what happens in implementation? This is a study, very famous study by Joyce and Showers. Learners who will implement into their practices as a result of learning. First of all, if you see a workshop or go to a presentation, a professional development, that's known as theory. You'll see 5% implementation of that pedagogy, because it's just, you've just heard it in a lecture-based professional development or in a classroom in a college course. But if you see that theory, and you see that person, presenter, demonstrate a lesson or maybe some videos, you might have 10% implementation. How do you start getting more implementation? Well, if there's demonstration and the teacher goes and practices, now there's 20% implementation. Still extremely, extremely low. Well, wait a second. Now we have theory, we have demonstration, the teacher is practicing, and here's corrective feedback. This is the corrective feedback where we write notes at the back of we observe a teacher, we write some notes, and we leave those notes at the back of the desk for the teacher to read after they've done presenting. You'll see 25% implementation. This number, it should say 90%. You get 90% implementation through theory, through demonstration, through practice, through feedback, and through in-situation coaching. I don't know why that's not showing on my slide. In-situation coaching is the key to EDI implementation, or to our pedagogy, and we believe anyone. We believe corrective feedback immediately to the teacher really helps them learn the strategies or unlearn other strategies. And the way we do that is elbow-to-elbow coaching. So that's why our leaders have to have a really strong understanding of EDI, what it should look like, what all the practices should look like, what all the engagement norms should look like, what the pedagogy is, so they are able to give that feedback and even do in-situation coaching. Coincidentally, the last 2 weeks, we've been doing a lot of instructional leadership workshops, and we're getting superintendents and principals and administrators, and we're getting them up and teaching. I mean, I could show you a pretty slideshow of, you see some principals in front of the class teaching, but that's what it takes. So they understand this is what it feels like to implement EDI. It looks deceptively easy, but there's a lot of thinking that's going on when I teach an EDI lesson. Because again, this is about decision making. I'm getting information from my students and I'm constantly making decisions. Do I speed up? How can I differentiate here? This student is stuck on this. How can I go and support them? I can scaffold one and I can extend another. So there's a lot of thinking that's going on when I'm delivering a lesson. So when is coaching useful? Effective coaching focuses on changing performance. We want to support teachers. Now remember, because the tendency at the university level is to get a lot of theory, when we get into the classroom, teachers are sometimes put into survival mode. And what I mean by that, we're just trying to get by. Teaching has one of the highest turnover rates of any profession. It's known as one of the highest, most stressful professions, because we go in there and sometimes we're not prepared. So we learn habits, calling on students with the raised hands, just reading, just trying to get through our days. And eventually these habits become automatic to us, and they might be bad habits. So as coaches and leaders, we have to focus on changing that performance with very specific criteria reference feedback. We're going to be talking a lot about that today because those are the videos. We're going to look at a few videos, and I want you to analyze these videos, and I want you to see if you can identify the strategies being used and the feedback you would give the teacher in the videos, okay? So we're focusing on changing performance. Here we have creation of a learning and performance agenda. That's when we really have that vision, okay? We do it with SMART goals. You know, we are gonna have standard-based lessons. That means we will be teaching lessons that are grade level content. We'll go over curriculum as well. And we will be using engaging EDI strategies. The first week, in the first 3 weeks, I want teachers to master track with me, read with me, and have their desks in pair share partners. And we give appropriate SMART goals. It takes a little bit more time to train early childhood age students. I was just doing a workshop with preschool teachers yesterday, and they're on week 2. And their thing to me right now is like, I can't get my students to pair share. And I'm like, it takes time. You have to be very consistent. You have to be consistent with the strategies and keep working at it. Preschool age students who are coming into school at 3 or 4 years of age are learning just the social norms of being away from home. You know, so we have to teach them, okay, this is what it's like to be in the classroom. This is how we pair share with simple strategies. And we'll go over that when we have year level specific groups. And this is one of the most important ones, I think. Feedback that is specific, accurate, and timely. Okay? What that is if we see a lesson, yes, we want to be positive, and we want to be positive with our teachers. And, oh, that was a beautiful lesson. Oh, I really enjoyed everything about, when you're not specific, it's difficult for the learner to understand exactly what you're talking about. So you want to be very specific of the positive strategies that they use that you thought was EDI applicable. For example, wow, you're really engaging the students. Obviously, we want to engage the students, but what does that mean? Okay, well, you tell them, oh, the way you pair shared and the students discussed with one another, and then you randomly selected them so they could answer out loud was very effective strategy. That's what we mean by being very specific and accurate and timely. So the goal, the reason we do this is to gain automaticity. I've been coaching now. I taught in the classroom for 6 years, and I've been a consultant and a coach for 15 years now. And I went through the learning process as well. I did not just pick this up overnight. It took time for me to gain automaticity. Most teachers, especially if you've been teaching for a while, you have your way of teaching already. So sometimes you're relearning new strategies. For me, the most difficult pattern to unlearn was calling on students with their hands up or starting my lesson with a question. If I was going to teach context clue, I would start with, who knows what a context clue is? Anyone? Who knows what a context clue? Who knows? Because I learned the KWL. That was the big movement when I was learning. Who knows what a character is? Yeah, who does? And I would call on students with their raised hand. Who knows what a prefix is? Yeah, that's how I started every lesson. Well, in EDI, we teach first. And you'll see when I go over TAPL why we teach first. We teach first with multiple examples, and then we ask a higher order question. So every student has a chance to answer that. So that was something that I had to unlearn. And speaking of unlearning, well, working memory, you can learn 5 new items at once with a lot of practice. You need 17 to 24 practice. So what I had to do is recondition myself to not start with a question. I'm like, teach first. And you'll see some of the teachers that I've seen have told me they get very excited when they see the workshop presentation. Oh, I want to try this. I want to do this. But when we get into the classroom, there is a learning curve, and there's so much thinking going on. Sometimes teachers get frustrated because they feel like they are cognitively overloaded. Do I track with me, read with me? Do I pair share here? Until they gain automaticity, until the teaching strategies are an extension of their teaching, then they can really see the full effect and impact that they have on their learners. Okay, they can see, wow, I can see how this is an extension now of my teaching, and I'm no longer a robot. Now my personality comes out. So that's the goal that we're going with. So my first question of the day is, how do we get 90% implementation? And what type of coaching is useful? On your whiteboard, write either number 1, number 2, or number 3. Why would that coaching be important the way you coach your teachers? All right, and you can choose one of those. Hopefully you have a few people you can pair share with. I didn't see too many individuals. This group might be a little bit too big for breakout groups, but I'll let you have a chance to pair share really quick. Please go ahead and pair share. Grab a whiteboard and write either 1, 2, or 3. Be ready to discuss how you want to give feedback to your teachers. Okay, 3, 2, 1, show me your whiteboards. How would you like to give feedback to your teachers? When is coaching useful? Danielle, can you tell me why you chose 3?
I do some coaching most of the time when I'm not a principal. So for me, the feedback that is specific, accurate, and timely helps them to reflect on what they've been doing and see where to go next. So that seems to work in my context.
And that's really going to be the premise of today, is identifying the strategy so you're able to articulate specific feedback to your teacher. That's going to be what we're going to be working on. Okay, can you identify the strategy being used, or can you identify the strategy that isn't being used, and how can you support your teachers to adopt that strategy and refine it? Okay, and we'll go over that in a second. Can I see those whiteboards again? Okay, we have a lot of 3s. Everyone, you're all my teachers' pets, because that's my favorite one. But, I'm just thinking, because that's what what I learned to be an effective coach, we all implement at different times and levels. Some teachers can just take off and they get it. Some need more support. So what really helps me as a coach is to really be able to look at a teacher and where they're at the level of implementation and give them the next step. Because eventually you will have some teachers who are really getting all the engagement arms, who are really ready for the next piece of implementation or level of implementation. And then you'll have some who still need some support on different ones. And you'll find that you have to give each one different feedback. Because if you just say, hey, we want everyone at this stage, or if we want everyone at this stage, eventually you have a separation between implementation of your teachers. You have to know how to support the ones who need more support. Maybe they need to come in and observe the other teachers, and they talk about the strategies, especially the ones you want seen implemented. Okay, so let's go into specific strategies of EDI. Okay, this is page 37. How can we get instructional leadership for change? Providing training is easy, implementation is hard. Like I just showed you, 5%, just seeing a professional development day, you'll see 5% implementation. And it's hard because we're having to sometimes unlearn habits, or we are learning new habits. I'll share a quick story. One of my first roles in Australia is I worked for a company, Good to Greater Schools. They brought us out and they wanted us to work. They had a huge remote schools contract and funding for remote schools. And I mean, I've honestly been to more parts of Australia than almost the majority of Australians. I've been to outbacks. I've been to almost every state. I've been almost killed by every wildlife that Australia has to offer. Sharks, snakes, spiders, and I'm not joking. I've had sharks, I've had snakes, I've had spiders. I've been all over the place in Australia. Sometimes it was exciting in the beginning, but towards the end, I'm like, I just want to stick to cities. But where I'm going with this is I would go to some remote areas and they saw EDI as the next step. And if you know anything about remote education, they need to really sweeten the deal for teachers. Teachers can come out, but it's very difficult to stay for a long time. So I would go out and spend a long time in 1 year teaching a teacher to get them trained in EDI. I'd go 2 to 3 times in a year. And at the end of the year, what would happen to that teacher who was working in a remote location? They'd go back to the cities. So after all that resources and flying me out in planes, and I mean, when I'm talking about planes, I don't know, they're these little tiny jumper planes. I have a flying issue now because of that. But where I was going with this is they also did a lot of DI implementation. And as we did this, I recommended you should maybe stick to implementing DI, because direct instruction is a lot easier to implement because it's so scripted. You can get your teachers trained up very quickly, and there's a lot of great DI programs, spelling mastery, reading mastery, things like that, especially to fill in gaps and holes, because implementation can be difficult, especially with EDI. This is such teacher-led, and the decision-making and metacognition of the teacher is so important. It takes some time to get there. So that being said, we did have our success stories, people who had a 3-year vision, and we transformed schools when we could have consistency of staff, or more importantly, at least consistency of the top teachers and leadership, because those top teachers were the coaches who could support the new teachers coming in. Okay, so number 1, teachers teach using ingrained habits, often developed by trial and error over their years of teaching. If you've been teaching for a while, my first years, and I came with a lot of background knowledge, I did a lot of survival skills. How do I survive every day? I talk to people, I talk to my master teacher, what do I do? But once you're in the classroom by yourself, survival takes over. It is hard to take care of 20 to 25 to 30 learners at one time, especially to effectively engage them, especially with the curriculum. So you pick up a lot of habits, a lot of calling on raised hands, because you just want the flow. If you call on someone and they don't have the answer correct, you get nervous. Is that a reflection of your teaching? I had a teacher just yesterday tell me, it's like, when I call on students randomly now, some students don't know the answer. I'm like, well, I hope so, because that's higher order questioning. And if they don't know the answer, we have a lot of effective feedback strategies. We give them 50-50. For example, who knows which one is the character and why? And you call on a student randomly, you did what you're supposed to, and they can't answer, a teacher might panic. No, we tell them, okay, is the character the animal in the story that talks and does something like a person, or just a thing that doesn't do anything or any talking? 50-50, how can we de-escalate? There's a lot of de-escalation strategies where we give effective feedback. Okay, number 2, implementation requires changing adult behavior and habits. Again, if you know about cognitive brain research, we need 17 to 24 repetitions to learn something. Okay, we need over 70 to unlearn something. Once we've learned something, once we fossilized it incorrectly, it's very difficult to unlearn. For me, all of you have an example of this. For me, my really clear example is how I spell receive. To this day, I cannot spell receive correctly if I'm typing very quickly, because I unlearned it. I learned it incorrectly. If I slow down and go I before E except after C, or do that, I can spell it. But if I'm typing at full, I will never spell it correctly because I've learned it incorrectly. And I can't unlearn that. So unlearning adult behavior is very difficult. So that's why you need that constant feedback to do. We need to rewire. You're literally rewiring your brain. Synapses have connected with an unlearned process. We have to unconnect them and rewire them. Okay, and also humans tend to defend their existing beliefs. The pushback we will get is, well, this only works with this type of learner, or this only works in that one. Oh yeah, it'll work in that classroom because those students are the high performing students. Oh, it won't work in this classroom because I have the high performing students. We want to defend our existing beliefs, especially when doing something is difficult, especially when we aren't masters of it immediately. EDI, there is a growth stage that we need to get automaticity. And before we get to automaticity, where these strategies come out naturally, it feels very robotic. It feels actually very unnatural to teach because you're on cognitive overload. Do I pair share here? Oh, you might be teaching a lesson you've taught your whole career, how to identify characters, and you're trying it with the EDI strategies for the first time, and it becomes very frustrating because you don't know when to pair share, you don't know when to track with me, read with me, should I use whiteboards, should I do this? What is the decision I should make? So it feels unnatural. And I have to unlearn that. So I always tell the teachers, stick with this. First of all, let's do incremental growth a little bit at a time and stick with it until you get automaticity. And I promise you, once you get automaticity, this becomes an extension of your teaching. And more importantly, you will see the results. Okay. I can tell you story after story. What is it? Blue Haven. Here's a perfect example. Blue Haven went from the bottom 5% of the lowest performing schools to one of the top 5% of performing schools in Australia. They were the school of the year. When I first showed up there, they had huge discipline issues where there was, a lot of external variables, drama, substance abuse issues, chaotic home lives. Students coming in with a lot of trauma. And so when I went there, the students were out of control. They were just, it was very difficult. There was a lot of behavioral management issues. But as they implemented EDI, as you saw students become successful, as you saw cohesiveness of consistency of how they taught throughout the boards, especially year after year, year ones were taught the same way with the same strategies in year two. They knew those strategies, how to do that. And more importantly, they were becoming successful at year level content. It transformed the dynamic and the whole atmosphere of that school. And so what Blue Haven started doing, they started inviting people to come observe their school. And we did an EDI lesson one time, and the feedback afterwards was, it looks great here because these students are so well behaved. But this could never work at our school because our students are so out of control. We have so many external variables and factors. And it was like, well, no, we started there, but this is how they changed. But because it's really hard, you want to defend your existing beliefs. So what do you need for change? You need three things. You need the will. You need the desire to change, knowing the need for change and mandated change. Okay, you need the desire to change. Are you willing to do this? I always tell teachers, why did you become a teacher? Can we remember? I mean, it's not for the big bucks usually. It's because you want to make a difference in people's lives, especially kids or students. This is a noble profession. Teaching is always rated as one of the most stressful professions with one of the highest turnover rates of any profession. I mean, there's like deep sea crab fishermen who have risks of death who are rated up there. And then there's teaching, because it's so stressful. But at the same time, teaching is also rated as one of the most rewarding professions anyone can ever get into. If you have the skills to successfully support students, it's a very powerful profession to do that. So I always encourage and remind people, why did we get into teaching? Well, usually it's to make a difference in other people's lives that are usually children or your students. So you need that will. Then you do need the skill. You need the ability to use new practices. Can you adapt? Can we give these teachers enough support to internalize these rules? And that's what's tricky. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why teachers can be effective and why they're ineffective. We can teach them the strategies, but a teacher also has to have really strong understanding of their year level content. You need to be an expert of what you're teaching, and there's a lot of reasons why sometimes the the skill isn't there. But to truly implement, you need metacognition. This is the goal that I have with all my teachers, especially my coaches. Do you have an awareness of discrepancy between what you are doing and the correct implementation of new practices? Even to this day, my favorite thing to do as a consultant is to go into the classroom and teach students. I'm a practitioner. That's my skill. My skill is I know how to deliver an EDI lesson. That I'm very confident of, and I love to do it because I love to see students learn. But even to this day, I'm pretty good at it. I'm not tooting my own horn. I still reflect after every lesson. What could I have done? You know, I don't feel like I engaged that student over there. How could I? I'm always trying to reflect on that, on my lesson, particularly lesson demonstrations, because I have so many people observing, because I'm always refining my strategies. EDI has been a fluid pedagogy. When we first started this 15 years ago, it was much more mechanical, much more scripted, and we didn't have as much higher order questioning. As we've moved and evolved through a lot of a refinement in real world application, all of our consultants lesson demonstrate. We teach classes, we've refined it to get to higher order questioning and thinking. And to do that, you need metacognition. So that is when a teacher can reflect, I'm using whiteboards, but I'm not having my students justify. I'm having my students pair share, but they're not asking higher order questions. They're just repeating definitions. I need to be careful about this. So the metacognition is the awareness of the practices. That's why this next, what we'll be doing is identifying those strategies. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 things for change and for implementation. On your whiteboard, choose one of them. What would you think would be one of the more challenging, or what do you think is one of your main goals as a leader or for your teachers? Okay, write one of the numbers on your whiteboard. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And go ahead and pair share with your partners. Now, quick little side note. When I teach, I give examples. Every time I've taught one of these sentences, I explain it with different examples, and I make connections where you can relate in the classroom. Next, I let you choose one so you can articulate your understanding of one of these. Then I let you pair share. The pair sharing so you can have confidence in your answers, and then I'll listen to responses to make decisions. I do the same thing with my students, whether they're preschool, year 3s, or principals and administrators. I'm using that same strategy. That's what I'm doing here. Teach first, ask a question, pair share, and then check for understanding. Go ahead, pair share, get ready to show me your whiteboards. Three, two, one, show me your whiteboards, please. Julie Brown, can you tell me why you chose, I grew up with MTV, so I don't know if anyone remembers MTV, but there was a Julie Brown on there. Can you tell me why you chose 7, the metacognition part? What does that mean to you? What does metacognition mean to you?
Yeah, I chose 6 and 7 because I think as we learn more, then that increases our metacognition because we don't know what we don't know. So our teachers are trying to reflect on their practices, but they also need to develop the skill at the same time because otherwise they're reflecting on, it doesn't increase. Like they could just reflect on what they think is correct and what they know, but they need to build the skill at the same time. So they've got more to reflect on. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And it's actually spot on. How do you have metacognition on something you don't understand? How do you reflect on something you're not sure if it's even correct? So we work very hard to really understanding what a strategy should look like. I give examples, whiteboards should look like this and why and how. You know, first, I even give my students metacognition. First of all, metacognition is also understanding why you do something. So when I tell my students, this is why we track with me, read with me. We read so you can become better readers. Reading opens so many doors. One of the number one indicator of success in any profession you will choose to go into, whether it's in a university level or any other profession, a professional athlete, a singer, musician, is your reading ability. How well you read opens doors. That's why my job as your teacher is to teach you how to read. That's why we track with me, read with me. That's why we pronounce these words. That's why I'm having you do this. I tell my students why we do the strategies we do. I tell my teachers why we do the strategies we do. I tell my principals, so you understand, and more importantly, so you have buy-in, okay? And yeah, until you do, so when you understand why, then you can reflect. Oh, interesting story about that. I'll just give you a quick example. On that first remote grant of training remote schools, it was K through 6. But I worked with the school, Carnarvon, WA, good old Carnarvon. K through 6 did EDI, but then those students in 7th and 8th grade, there wasn't EDI funding or training, not the first few years. So by the second or third year, I could show you their NAPLAN scores and what they did and the growth that they made. Those students had been learning or being taught with EDI strategies, and then they went to 7th and they went to 8th grade, and it reverted back to the lecture-based teaching, the high school teacher lecture-based, and then called on students with hands up. And the feedback from those students were, we don't seem to be able to discuss with one another with pair sharing. We don't get to use whiteboards. We just sit there passively. We just, they had metacognition of the difference in their teaching and in their learning. Like, it used to be so much more interactive for us when we pair shared and did all these strategies. So they brought us in there to train their middle school teachers in these strategies, because those students had been doing it year after year, the year 3s, 4s, 5s, and as they moved up. So even the students had that metacognition. All right, let's see our whiteboards one more time. Okay. All right, well, we're all on the same page. I see a lot of blurry ones, but we have a lot of 7. So let's get to metacognition. Let's get to understanding EDI strategy. All right, page 38. I'm going to go back to this. Though we have many rubrics to support our teachers, these two are my 2 favorite. And if any of you need a copy of this, you're welcome to have that. I can email you. They are in your PDF. These are student engagement norm rubrics and what it looks like. These are the engagement norms. I don't know if you have the engagement norms in front of you. This is implementation of the EDI strategies. First, let me show you the engagement norms. Pronounce with me. That's when we pick a word and pre-pronounce it for our students. Look at this word here, students. Engagement. Your turn. Engagement. Again, engagement. Track with me, read with me. That's when we do full sentences. Track with me, students are following along. Student engagement is created when the teacher asks the students to do something. Read with me, student engagement is created when the teacher asks the students to do something. To support reading fluency. It's another form of exposures of the information. Gesture with me, it's to store information in multiple ways. It's a cognitive mnemonic strategy where a gesture can be connected to the definition, it's used throughout the lesson, and the students are doing the gesture. The pair share, where they're interacting and collaborating with each other, A's to B's, B's to A's, where everyone gets a chance to answer, and pair shares should be started with a higher order question. Attention signal, how to regroup students from a pair share. Whiteboards, how you check for understanding in real time, where students are showing you whiteboards where they're justifying their answers. They don't just show you when, a big mistake is we might go in and observe a teacher and all the students are using whiteboards, but if they're not justifying their thinking, I chose yes. I believe it's a character because that monkey in my story talks like a person, and that would make it a character. Okay, they need to justify. That's the key. And then, are they speaking in complete sentences, full public voice. But even here, the usual misapplication is they're just using conversational English in complete sentences. What is your answer? Is it A or B? My answer is A. That's a complete sentences, but that's not what we would consider an academic vocabulary complete sentence. We want to hear, in what sentence did you see an example of a context clue? Oh, sentence A has an example of a context clue. We want to see the academic language being taught used in the complete sentences the students are using, okay? So that is, and I'm jumping through a few workshops. I have 4 workshops open at once. This one is on the Instructional Leadership 121, but I have a few workshops open at once. This is a different one, but you will see that there. So that being said, that's my first goal with my teachers. I have this rubric and I let them know, let's see how we're doing with our engagement norms. Okay, are you pre-reading? Do you teacher reads? Do the students track with you? Okay, in early childhood, kindergarten for us is your foundation, or in South Australia would be reception. So reception to year 2s. Do you use phonics and pre-read? 3 through year 12, do you pre-read and pre-read difficult words, and then do students read? How I refine this eventually is, what sentences are teachers choosing to track with me, read with me? They shouldn't be tracking and reading with me the whole lesson, because it becomes too robotic and you start taking you start cognitively overloading your students. You have to get to the focus of the lesson is still the concept. So we tick boxes. Teacher reads, students read. Teachers using track with me, read with me. Number 2, repeats important words or phrases that need to be remembered verbatim. Repeats for pronunciation. So do they do pronounce with me? Okay. Here's for gestures. Uses gestures that are cognitively connected to the concept or skill. Okay. Do they attach a gesture to the definition, and then do they attach it to the examples? Students do the gestures. I've seen teachers do beautiful gestures, but they're not having the students do it. The students need to do it. That's the person retaining. That's the kinesthetic cognitive strategy. The students need to do it, and the students need to say it at the same time. It's a multiple pathway that they're making that connection. This is another one that's really tough for me. Are they repeating gestures during the lesson? A teacher might have a wonderful gesture used, and they use it one time. Not enough repetitions for long-term retention. Just like 17 to 24 repetitions, you should be using the gesture throughout your lesson, throughout your periodic review, throughout your spiral review. And eventually, some students use their own gestures. This is for older students, maybe year 5s and up, who can now create their gestures. A high school teacher or a principal mentioned, and usually high school teachers down the line tell me, well, how does this look in high school? We use simple gestures, but I give those students metacognition. I'm very clear. This is to help you remember more. It's a simple, succinct gesture to help you retain more information. I even explain to them how photographic memory works. You know, people have a misconception that photographic memory is your brain taking a picture of a page. No, people with photographic memory are making symbols for every word or sentence. They've turned everything into a symbol, into something different. That's how they can memorize everything. So gesture is a symbol to you. Convergent boundaries, boundaries that go one under the other and above the other. Divergent boundaries, separate. I haven't done this. Transvergent boundaries, go side to side. Balanced equation, inverse operation. So simple gestures. This one's for pair sharing. Does the teacher direct students to pair share? One of the most important ones, it should be emphasized. What type of questions are they asking? Is the teacher asking higher order questions? And last, student partners are labeled A to Bs. Do A's go first sometimes, and do B's go first other times? The reason this is so important, higher order question is the next level of implementation. That is the true basis of our pedagogy. The reason higher order questions is so difficult is teachers get stuck when their students don't know the answer. They want their students to be successful. So it's read the definition to me. Or they ask, in your own words, what is a context clue? If you ask that too early in the lesson, they're just going to repeat the definition. Which one is an example of a context clue? How do you know? Why is A an example of a context clue? How do you know? Why is B not an example of a context clue? What's the difference between A and B? Okay, that's how we get higher order questions. And when our students get stuck, we have a lot of effective feedback strategies to help them. Do we use an attention signal to regroup students? And then here's for whiteboards. Our whiteboards to check for short answers. We don't want consistently students writing too much on a whiteboard. If they write more than a sentence, you have 20 plus students, you're not going to be able to see. It's going to slow down your pace because you have to read each page. You want short answers like an A or a B, or 1/2, but the student's justifying. Okay, B is an example of a context clue because those nearby words will help me determine the meaning of the unknown word. That's the key. Ask the students to read their answers, ask the students to explain, interpret, or justify their answers. Okay, and then complete sentences. Provides sentence starters using academic and content vocabulary. Okay, students respond using complete sentences. So in the beginning, a skilled teacher will say, we're looking for context clues. Which is an example of a context clue? How do you know? I always know a really skilled teacher in EDI, you cue your students with the question you ask. And what I mean by that, I never ask the students, what's the answer? Is it A or B? Is it the language I want used in the answer is the language I will use in my question? Which is an example of a character? How do you know? Which is an example of a unit fraction? How do you know? I want unit fraction is it? Which is an example of a numerator? Which is an example of a denominator? Why? Because students will learn to flip your question into a complete sentence. The example of a denominator is the bottom number of a fraction. The example of a context, that's why the questions the teacher asks supports those complete sentences. And that's the language you want to hear. Okay, so when we're ticking off those boxes, then we know that our engagement norms are being implemented and implemented properly. And then our next one is TAPL. Are the teachers teaching first? I'm going to go over more examples of TAPL on the next sessions because I want to show how we set up our questions. But do we teach first? Do we ask a question? Do you pair share? Pick a non-volunteer, listen to the response, and effective feedback. The next time I have you in year level groups, I can show examples, and especially with the effective feedback and how we teach first. So that will be more for those next sessions. But today, let's focus on student engagement norm rubrics. Everyone, I want you to get your whiteboard and be ready to tick. Also have the student engagement poster or page open to you. I think Ross said it was on page 21. Okay, when you see this teacher teaching, I want you to tick which engagement norms you're seeing, and be ready to discuss and give feedback on those engagement norms. Okay?
Track with me because I'm going to read it first and then I want you to read it. Density is a measurement of how tightly matter is packed together. Let's read it, please. 1, 2, 3. Density is a measurement of how tightly matter is packed together. And matter, when we're talking about matter, of course, we're talking about atoms or we're talking about molecules. So let's make believe that we have here these little molecules or atoms, or we can call it matter. These ones, they're very packed together. Let's go like this. They're packed together. When I ask you to do gestures, you're going to have to do them with me because that's going to help you remember. So let's go like this. The matter is packed together. In the other one, the matter is not tightly packed together. It's like this, isn't it? So I would say that this one here, this cube A, is more dense than cube B. It's almost like if I'm looking at here, let's take a look at this paper here. I have some tissue here. The density of this tissue is 0.25 gram per centimeter cube. The density of this paper is 0.80 gram per centimeter cube. I want you to tell your partner why is it that this paper is more dense than this tissue here? Go ahead and talk to each other and be ready to tell me, please. And A, go first. One, two. Number 6. Why is it that this paper is more dense than the tissue here?
It's more dense because it's more compact together.
Okay, matter is more closely packed together. Let's go like this. Matter is more, like, let's all do it, please. 1, 2, 3. Matter is more tightly packed together. That's what density is.
Okay, so that was 2 minutes of teaching. In that 2 minutes on your whiteboards, let's talk about this so we can all discuss. What engagement norms did you see? What feedback would you give this teacher? Criterion reference. For example, I saw track with me, read with me, and the feedback I'd give this teacher would be, I was impressed how you tracked with me, read with me the definition of density so the students could hear and be able to read and pronounce the words in that definition. And then all the students read that afterwards. Okay, so that's criterion reference feedback. All right, so your turn. What strategies, engagement norms did you see? And here's what's really subtle. I'm just going to point this one out because it sometimes is confusing. These students use complete sentences. When you've trained your students so well on using complete sentences, you no longer use sentence frames or starters. I've heard, I've gone through walkthroughs and principals have told me, oh, they're not using sentence starters. And I'm like, well, are all the students answering in complete sentences with academic language? Like, yes, because that's how well this teacher's trained those students. They know that's the expectation of the class. And that didn't happen overnight. So there was a complete sentence, but though she didn't use a sentence starter, it's because she had been addressing how to use a complete sentence with the academic vocabulary. I believe it was density in that. Okay, go ahead, talk with each other. It's not only what you saw, but how you give the feedback of what you saw. I saw everything but whiteboards there. I saw a gesture, but we have to be specific of how the gesture was used. Was the gesture connected to the definition? Was the gesture, look, if there was, I'm like, let's make sure more of our students are saying the definition when you connect to that gesture. You know, that would be one of the feedbacks. You know, ironically, not ironically, but coincidentally, these videos are 8 years old, maybe long, maybe 10 years now. And now that we look at them, there's some refinement even in this video that we would give ourselves. All right. So how about the Karen and Nick group? What engagement norms did you see? What would be the feedback you could give the teacher?
I think the thing that stood out for us was that she had visuals in the form of the 2 different types of paper. And she held those up very clearly. It was easy to see they were the same size bits of paper, but she articulated the difference in the weightings of the paper, which was really important when you think about the concept of density. So then she got them to have a think about the difference about those bits of paper. Yeah.
So this is a misconception that usually occurs with EDI. People will say, oh, I didn't know you could use manipulatives or realia or anything. Yes, we can use any example. In fact, the premise of teaching concept development, you'll learn, is we always give an academic definition, the academic definition of density. And for them, students to contextualize that, multiple examples of what that means. Density is a very difficult concept, especially if you just see it as a definition. Examples are the key. What can you point to? We would prefer you use manipulatives. Look, a tissue paper and a copy paper, one's much more dense. That's why it's density. you know, here, look at this atom. All these atoms are very congested. There's a lot of little tiny atoms. This one, not so much. That's why this one's more dense. So we point to an example, and instead of a gesture, I'd say, look, you used the gesture, but I also liked how you used real world examples to have this as an example for the definition. Okay. I want to show, I'm running out of time, but I did want to show elementary, just a younger group really quick. So again, tick off the boxes of the engagement norms that you see and be ready to give feedback to this teacher.
Track while I read this for you first. Everyone can either point on their paper up here. A verb and when I say past tense, this is our gesture. Past tense, everyone do this because it happens in the past. I'll explain it a little bit better. A verb in the past tense shows an action that has already happened. Now let's read that together. A verb in the past tense shows an action that has already happened. Past tense. Everybody gesture with me? That's how we know. That's the past tense. Track with me while I read this first. To use the past tense verb in a sentence correctly, identify clue words. So now let's read this together.
To use the past tense verb in a sentence correctly, identify clue words.
Okay, let's read. Some of the clue words in a sentence will tell us it's in the, everybody, past tense. Here's some clue words. Read them with me. Before, yesterday, last, earlier, in the past. Let me show you what that looks like. Everyone can read this sentence with me. Jill jumped in the pool last night. Well, she did this last night. Ready? Last night, so it's in the past tense. Track with me first. A regular verb in the past tense ends in ed. This is the key. Now read this with me.
A regular verb in the past tense ends in ed.
For example, everyone read this verb? Jump.
Jump.
But if I want it to be in the past tense, everyone do past tense? I add ed. So it's jumped. Everyone say jumped?
Jump.
And this is a sentence in the past tense. Ready? Read it.
Jill jumped in the pool last night.
I added ed, and now it's in a regular verb is in the past tense. Can we read that with me? Explain why the regular verb cook changes to cooked in the past tense. And when you answer,
Just a little, I know I haven't covered TAPL yet, teach first. That was the segment, those first 2 minutes was teaching first. Now I've asked the question, I let them pair share, pick a non-volunteer, listen to their answers, and give effective feedback. So this is an example of TAPL as well with our engagement ones.
this, you say it changes to cook because something changed. What has changed between cook and cooked? Why is it now in the past tense?
Cooked has an ed and cook it doesn't.
A's, talk to B's and tell them and make sure you have the right answer and you understand what's changed.
What's changed is the ed.
Eyes front.
That's great.
Giselle?
Changed because ed is added.
Exactly. It's in the past tense. It changes because ed is added. Whenever a verb ends in ed, we know it's a regular verb in the, everyone, past tense. Very good.
We saw the engagement norms, but the feedback I would give this teacher is you're using complete sentences, but the students didn't use the academic language. They should have used past tense in their answers, okay? Ed changes that verb into the past tense. But that's that metacognition, that's that self-reflection. And that's, where we've gone. And that, like I said, that video was a long time ago. And when I see it, it's very hard to watch to begin with, but that's the refinement we've done. It's like, oh, wait a second. I wasn't doing that. I did track with me, read with me. I did that academic definition of past tense and then multiple examples. I would have had the kids probably do the gesture a little bit more specifically of what it meant. When you're using a gesture, make sure you connect it with the definition. Past tense happens in the past. That's why I'm doing this. This is in the past. That's the feedback I would have given myself after watching that video. And because I know I'm at a level where I can take that feedback. We have to be very careful, you know, depending on your teacher's ability level, we just give them the next step of growth. Okay. Anyway, I've gone a little bit over our time. I'm very sorry. I wanted to show you 2 videos. Hopefully next time, or not hopefully, we will show much more specific to your year levels. I'll talk to Ross to see exactly what that would look like. And thanks for your time. We'll see you very shortly. All right, have a wonderful, I think close to afternoon. Yep.
Joe, before you go,
Yes.
on behalf of all of my sites, I'd like to thank you once again for a highly engaging, very practical session. And the videos were great to see, and I'm sure that people back in their sites have got lots to think about.